running away from them and keeping them at a distance, we hold on to them and allow them to ruin our lives. Here are 4 toxic everyday habits that are killing you slowly. Number 1, getting too little sleep. You know how much sleep you need, but you scroll through your social media, check your email, or worry about things you can't control instead. Number 2, drinking too little water. 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated. At best, dehydration causes low energy levels. At worst, it's a factor in almost every sickness and disease. Number 3, holding on to negativity. Negativity, worrying too much and taking things personally, which were not meant to be personal at all, lead to high stress, which is a factor in 6 of the leading causes of death in America today. And number 4, always being busy. We're rushing about everywhere, always going to this party or that event. Kill you physically? Maybe not, but it will kill your soul. We need time to do nothing, to refresh, rejuvenate, and recharge our passion and energy for life. Run away from the habits in your life that are killing you. Remove them from your life and never let them back in. And remember, don't just be yourself, be the best version of yourself. And if you enjoy...
This is the image that Gucci would like to project.
Gucci doesn't belong in a mall. It belongs in a museum.
I could have my Gucci on.
Where the Gucci back row?
Gucci, 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 please. Gucci, please.
Gucci is that brand that makes people think they want to live larger than life and be sexy and be adventurous and be unconventional.
But behind the scenes, things have been a bit less glamorous.
Still in shock from Gucci's dramatic slowdown.
Gucci sales falling 20% in Asia.
A steep drop in sales at its flagship Gucci brand.
Clearly, Gucci isn't at the top of its game.
So how did Gucci and the $50 billion conglomerate that owns it fall from high fashion to the discount rack? While Gucci is an icon of Italian fashion, it's been owned by the French company Kering for the past 2 decades.
Kering is a luxury conglomerate that is controlled by the Pinault family.
Even though it is an established multi-brand luxury group, they have other storied brands like Yves Saint Laurent and Bottega Veneta and Balenciaga. Gucci is really the mothership for the company.
Kering was founded by Francois Pinault, who built the company through acquisitions over several decades. He's now 87, and his son, Francois-Henri, has taken over.
He's well known because he hangs out quite a lot on the red carpets. His wife is Salma Hayek, the actress and producer.
Now, Kering's big rival is LVMH, the owner of Louis Vuitton and Christian Dior, among others. That company is run by Bernard Arnault. So there's a duopoly in the French fashion world, with LVMH under Arnault on one side and Kering under Pinault on the other. That rivalry really came to a head in the late 90s when Arnault had set his sights on acquiring Gucci for LVMH.
And that was the point when Tom Ford and Domenico De Sole were running Gucci as a public company, and they didn't want Mr. Arnault to have it. And they ended up signing an agreement with Francois Pinault, the father, who was the white knight who came in.
So initially they bought a 40% stake in Gucci, and eventually they bought the rest of it after a lot of acrimonious moves against LVMH.
During that era, Kering was about the same size as LVMH. In the years since, they've had different trajectories. With savvy deal-making and management, LVMH's value has soared to $450 billion, while Kering's hasn't.
LVMH's market cap nowadays is about 10 times bigger than Kering's. Kering is very dependent on Gucci. Basically, about 50% of its sales come from Gucci, but more than 2/3 of operating profit come from Gucci.
So when Gucci is suffering, the whole company is suffering.
At LVMH, it's slightly different. Louis Vuitton generates about a quarter of total sales, but it's about half of total profitability. The fact that LVMH is less dependent on one single brand provides more stability.
Even so, Gucci, and therefore Kering, has had a few successful years. And that was largely down to one man, Alessandro Michele.
In the years that followed the nomination of Alessandro Michele as creative director at Gucci in 2015, The label did really, really well. They kept putting out hit products.
There was the Marmont bag in 2016, for instance, and the Dionysus bag.
Так, у меня вообще нормально слышно, да, вроде,
Very
кстати,
soon,
да.
They really became a hit product. They really resonated well with the younger generation. They were bohemian, they were maximalists, and they were chic. And during that time, the market cap of Kering actually quadrupled. Sales at Gucci more than tripled.
But being a top fashion brand comes with problems.
Finding that right balance in the fashion industry to stay on top and yet have your products be fresh, it's very difficult to hit and it's very difficult to maintain over the long term.
The Fashion Retail List publishes rankings on the world's most fashionable brands, and Gucci has fallen down the rankings.
Since 2022, the performance at Gucci and therefore Kering has really suffered. Sales have missed a number of times and the stock price has really tumbled.
The success of Louis Vuitton has meanwhile helped turn Bernard Arnault into, at times, the richest person in the world, and his was a very different strategy.
So, I mean, in some ways, Louis Vuitton has a more classic image and positioning. LVMH has been at this longer.
To animation, let's jump into it. Okay, so here we are in Blender. Now, I'm going to try and make this as beginner friendly as possible. If you've never done animation before, this is where you want to be starting, okay? Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to talk about the big picture. So how does animation in a computer animation software program work? And what is it that you're doing to make it happen? So let's take our default cube. I'm just going to click on it. And we've got our timeline down here. I'm just going to bring this up a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. So right now, the start of my timeline is frame 1, which is right here. And the end is frame 250. Now, if I press the play button, you can see we play through and nothing's happened because we haven't done anything yet. But this is how we can play back and view our animation. I'm going to click this button here to jump to the start of my timeline, and I'm going to set a keyframe. Now, what's a keyframe? A keyframe is we're storing the positional information of an object at a certain frame. So I'm saying this object at this frame is going to have this location and this rotation and this scale. Now, in the little orange box, the object properties, when you select an object, you get object properties. You see they change when I select the camera because it's in a different position and rotation. But if I select this cube, we can see that it's at the location of 0, 0, 0. So 0 on the X, 0 on the Y, and 0 on the Z. And it's got 0 rotations. So it's not rotated at all, and it's set to a scale of 1. So it's very basic, straightforward. Nothing's been done to this cube. Now, I can set a keyframe for this. There's several ways to do it. You can click the little button next to each of these channels right here. You can see it turns yellow. Yellow means that it's got a keyframe on it. And you get this diamond shape. And then also, and you see in our timeline, we get this diamond here that shows up. Now, this is like an object. I can hit G to grab and move it around and position it wherever I want in my timeline on whatever frame I want. And what this little diamond represents is this X location. So if I click this little drop down, you can see this summary. I can click this button right here. You can see if we open this little drop down, it gives us a summary, tells us what's going on. Here it is down at the very bottom level, X location. And we've got all of these extra keyframes. Looks like we've got a bunch of keyframes. It's all just one, actually. It's just showing me, the way Blender works is with these hierarchies, it always shows you if there's any key on this frame, it'll show up on the summary level. All right, now another way of doing it is select it. And let's go here, and I'm going to hit I, and I brings up the insert keyframe memory. And you can insert a keyframe for any of these things, and we can just say, okay, I'm going to insert a keyframe for the location. The other thing you can do is come over and hover over the channel box themselves and hit I, and that will set a keyframe there. That'll do it quickly for all the channels. So hopefully that makes sense. I can set one here for scale as well. And so now we've got a keyframe for everything. Now you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 keyframes, but we only see one in the timeline. Well, if you open it up, you can see now we've got all these channels added to the list, and each one has its own keyframe. So we've set a keyframe here at this frame. So let's see what happens. I'm going to go forward. Let's go to like frame 80 maybe. And I'm going to hit G and Z, and I'll move the cube up, and I'll move it forward, G and X, right here. And I've got a couple things that have changed. So all these channels are now green, and we've got forward. Let's go to like frame 80 maybe. And I'm going to hit G and Z, and I'll move the cube up, and I'll move it forward, G and X, right here. And I've got a couple things that have changed. So all these channels are now green, and we've got this orange channel here on the X and the Z. So what's this telling me? And I don't have any diamonds in my timeline. So what's being told to me now is that the green means this channel has a keyframe on it somewhere. So there's some positional information stored, or rotation or scale information stored for this channel somewhere in my timeline, but not on this current frame. Orange means there's a keyframe somewhere for this channel, and it's different from the current value of the object. So that means, hey, you've moved this, but you haven't made a new keyframe yet. It's kind of a warning, this orange color. It's sort of like, hey, you changed this channel. It doesn't match the only keyframe that you've got. And the reason why this is a warning is because if I move my playhead now, Blender's going to first check, all right, it sees where it is right now, and it's going to look for any keyframes. It goes, oh, is there a keyframe for the X channel? And it goes, oh, yep, there is. So when I move, say I go to frame 79, it's going to find the keyframe, and it's going to say, all right, you've saved this value as the X location. So this value is important. I need to keep this value for the X location no matter what you've done to it, okay? And so it will reset this orange value back to whatever it is that's saved in the keyframe. So watch, if I go one frame back, let's say, or even no frame, I just click on my timeline, you can see it resets back and it goes back to 0, and I've lost that position. So this can be kind of frustrating if you're not used to it as a beginner. You're like, you set a position, you spend a lot of time, you get it just where you want, and then you click somewhere and it resets. And you're like, oh, I've lost all that work. It's really frustrating. So there's one way to get around that. So first thing is just to, be mindful of that, right? And let's get it back in our position, and you make sure you keyframe it. So I can either just click just for this channel. So now I've saved the X value. You can see I've got a new keyframe there, and now it's not going to lose the X value, but it will lose the Z. So you can see either just, and let's get it back. So first thing is just to, it's really frustrating. So there's one way to get around that. So first thing is just to, be mindful of that, right? And let's get it back in our position, and you make sure you keyframe it. So I can either just click just for this channel. So now I've saved the X value. You can see I've got a new keyframe there, and now it's not going to lose the X value, but it will lose the Z. So you can see it's kept the X, but it's got rid of the Z because I didn't set a keyframe for that. So the first thing you can do is just always remember, hit I to set a keyframe when you make a change. That's important. The other way, if you don't want to think about that, you just want to focus on the position of things, is to turn on auto keying, which is this button right here. So if you click this, now any change you do, so let's see, I'll go here, let's say, and grab Z, and you can see instantly it set a keyframe for everything. All the channels that have keys already, it set one for it at this frame, without me having to hit I or set a keyframe or anything. So this can be really handy for moving quickly because it saves whatever pose you do, whatever position you put something in. However, it can be very destructive if you're not careful, because if you don't remember that you have auto key turned on and you make some tweaks to see what something looks like, you might accidentally overwrite an important keyframe that you've already done. So there's benefits and sort of costs of both. So you have to be careful and think about, which one you want to use. I tend to work with auto key turned on. I find that's a really fast and efficient way to work, but you just have to be mindful that it's on and remember. Let's delete those keys. So I'm going to just drag a box around them and then hit delete. So that's how you can get rid of keys. You can interact with these like objects. Think of your keys as like objects in a scene, but they live in the timeline. Okay, now let's make some really simple animation, and we're going to talk about how to approach animation. So I'm going to go to frame 60, and again, I'm going to move it forward on the X and up on the Z. I've got auto key turned on, so I can see I've automatically got a key. And then let's come over to frame, 120, and let's bring it back down on the Z. I want it to match this Z. positions. So I know that that was 0. So I can just type that into the channel box, and now I know it's back to where it started. But I'm going to move it forward more on the X, right? So now if I look at my playback, you can see I've got this arc motion here with my cube. Ta-da! So you can see the computer is, or Blender is interpolating between these positions. We've got this position, that one, and it's creating everything in between to make that thing move. So that's kind of the essence of computer animation. The computer does a lot of animation for you. Now, what does this look like? Let's have a look at the graph editor. The graph editor is one of the really important tools of an animator. Let's switch over to the graph editor. We're just going to click on this little icon here and switch this layout view to the graph editor. And we can have a look at what's going on here. Now, there's a couple of settings that make the graph editor really, really intuitive to use. It's quite helpful. I recommend making these changes. So let's do those together real quick. I'm just going to open these up. We have all the channels that have keys listed for this object. You can see the object name there. And it shows us a curve that represents the value of each of these channels over time. Now, let's come up to preferences. We're going to go to animation. And right down here, unselected opacity, I recommend turning this right down. This makes the channels that aren't selected, you can see the graph curves, they start to disappear. I like to turn these right down so they're not distracting me. The other one you need is right here, this little tick box only shows selected F-curve keyframes. Now this used to live, if you're working on an older version of Blender, it's going to be under the view menu of the graph editor, but they've recently moved it into here, into preferences under animation. So just come over here and turn this on, only show selected F-curve keyframes. What that's going to do is basically whenever I select a channel here in this list, it will show me the keyframes just for that. And this means that I can easily, if I have a bunch of channels up, I can select a bunch of keyframes, or I can focus in and just select one. This is just a much easier way of working. Usually what happens in Blender is if you draw a box over this, it'll select any keyframe, even if the channel's not selected. And that can be really frustrating and confusing. So let's have a look at the Z location for this cube. You can see, we see the curve going up and going down. The Z is the up and down. And you can see how visually that's represented in the graph. I can grab this with G and I can move this graph point around, move it up and down. It's going to change how high it goes. And I can also change the timing of it, so I can have it go up quicker and then down slower. You can also hit S to scale, and that will change these handles, which change the interpolation, so the speed of these things. You can see we've got a slightly different feel to it. So you can easily come in and begin to manipulate your animation using these curves. So I can grab, I know that we're just using the X and the Z, so I can control click those two channels just to see them. And I can grab, this, and I can grab an X and bring it in to make it happen quicker. I can grab here and grab an X and drag this in, maybe grab this over, and then we have a look. We have a much different, animation than before. And I can change how far it goes. Let's say I don't want to go that far. So I'm going to go up and down. Cool. So you can manipulate the animation in really cool ways. You can also rotate these, which is fun. You can get some neat results out of that. And there's a logic to it. Like I could, if I want this thing to like hit the ground and bounce, I could scale the Z Bezier down to 0, right? So I could hit S and 0, and then I could come forward and select the Z location. And I can use the insert keyframe menu in here as well. And I'm going to set a keyframe only for the selected channel. I can grab Z and bring it up. And I don't want it to bounce as high the second time, so I can see this curve and I go, okay, I just want it to go a little bit. And then when I come forward, I only select the channels, scale that out so it's a bit of a slower arc. So now it's going to go bonk, bonk. See, it's really cool. Nice little. So this is how you can use the graph editor and the timeline and the insert keyframe menus, all that stuff to begin to animate and create really cool actions for your objects in your scene. So in my full-time job, I work in feature film animation. So in feature film animation, we actually don't rely on these curves as much as you might think. A lot of the work is actually done in a stepped form. Now let me show you what step keys are, what they look like, and then we can talk about how to use them. So I'm going to select, so hit A to select all the channels, A to select all my keyframes, and then I'm going to right click and you get this cool menu with a lot of different options. You can, do stuff in bulk to your keys. This one here, interpolation mode, this gives us lots of different options for interpolating between keyframes. So like how does, Blender create the motion out of a key into another? You can do some cool effects like bounce and elastic, does some automatic kind of bouncy effects. But typically there's these three, using constant, linear, and Bezier. Linear is just a direct line. So if I switch to linear, you can see everything goes quite geometric, quite pointy. And if we look at the animation on playback, it's donk, 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 donk. There's no speed up, no slow down. It's just direct line. So that's one way of manipulating stuff. I tend to like, whenever I'm doing that, I'll keep it on Bezier and I'll just scale the point to 0 like we did down here. That allows me then to like keep it Bezier, and if I want to, I can always, if I scale to 0, I can always click on it and like click again, and you get that like white line around the black dot, and that means you've grabbed one of those handles because they're all in the same spot. And I can hit G and I can just grab it out. And that way I can get those back if I want. I just like working that way, but it's the same as just switching this to linear or switching it back to Bezier. Anyways, so let's select all, right click, interpolation, constant. All right, so what's going on with this? It's a bit confusing in this view, so let's look at our Z location again. So you can see here, our keyframe that we've set at this point on frame, whatever it is, 19, is 0. And if I come forward, we scrub forward, we get to the next keyframe, the value is 6.6569. Anyways, Blender's not doing any interpolation at all now. With step keys, it's just taking you from this value to this value, and it just immediately changes on the frame where you set the new key. So you get this stepped motion, basically. It's like bonk, bonk, bonk. Now, when you're blocking out animation, sometimes this mode is really, really helpful to get a really clear idea of how your poses look and where they're going. And this is actually the mode that we use when we're sculpting out a new performance with a really complicated character or a simple object. We tend to use this mode. So let's create some animation using this mode, and I can talk about these concepts for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to my timeline. And let me explain this too. So right now, if I wanted to delete all my keyframes and start over, I would have to first come over here, hit A to select all channels. That will make all the keyframes appear. And then I could hit A over here to select all the keyframes, and then I could hit X to delete them, or I could hit the delete key to delete them. Sometimes it's easier just to go back to the timeline and then box select and delete. That's X to delete them, or I could hit the delete key to delete them. Sometimes it's easier just to go back to the timeline and then box select and delete. That's like one less click, maybe. Anyways. And then I'm going to reset my cube. Just click and drag down and set that back to 0. I'll go back to my beginning. Now, we don't have any playhead controls when you have the graph editor up, and that can be a bit annoying if you want to like just jump back to frame 0. So what I like to do is click here and drag up. This will create a new window, and then we can switch this to the timeline. And now I've got those playhead controls. So I can use those. Drag down and set that back to 0. I'll go back to my beginning. Now, we don't have any playhead controls when you have the graph editor up, and that can be a bit annoying if you want to like just jump back to frame 0. So what I like to do is click here and drag up. This will create a new window, and then we can switch this to the timeline. And now I've got those playhead controls, so I can use those to just move around really. Easily. So I'm going to go back to frame 1. And let's create some animations. So I'm going to create a ground. That'll help me think about things a bit better. So I'm going to go Shift A, Mesh Plane, scale this plane up, and then I will grab Z. I'm going to set this guy right on the plane. So I'm going to first bring him up so he looks like he's sitting on the plane. And let's go ahead and also turn on rendered view just so we can why not? See it in rendered view. And let's take our point light, and let's actually, we'll come up here. We're going to turn off scene world, and I'll just pick one of the built-in HDR eyes. Our point light, and let's actually, we'll come up here. Here we're going to turn off scene world, and I'll just pick one of the built-in HDR eyes. Just turn that strength down a little bit, maybe. Maybe turn the world opacity up so we can see it. And then let's take our cube and let's give it some color. I'm going to give it a base color of like red, maybe. Looks nice. And we want to make it look really nice, we can come to the modifiers and add a bevel modifier. Boom. Segments 2, right click, shade auto smooth. Look at that. So much prettier. Now, often when you're animating things, especially in a professional context, you'll have something called a rig for the object. And you'll hear that term thrown around a lot if you're learning Blender for the first time, and you may not be totally familiar with what that means. So let's actually roll this into what we're doing so you become familiar with the idea of a rig and what it is. The basic concept is a rig is like a puppet. It's a control system for a puppet. So you can adjust the controls to adjust the puppet's position in space. And that's what you animate. You animate the rig, and the rig is what moves the puppet around. Now, with our cube, we could just grab the cube and animate it, but if we want to do some things like have its scale change, for example, or have it, bounce off the ground, sometimes it's easiest to put the pivot point at the bottom of the object. Now, what's a pivot point? This orange dot right in the middle, this is the point from which everything happens. So the translation and the rotation and everything. So this value of 0.95933 meters on the Z, that's the location of that orange dot in 3D space. So that's how high up that is. If I was to scale this cube, let's say we wanted to like squeeze down and bounce up. If I hit S and Z, it's going to scale to that orange point. And that doesn't look right because I want it to sit on the ground. I want it to scale down to that point down at the bottom. Now we could move the pivot point of this object and just put it where we want it and just keep it there. But for the sake of understanding rigs, let's actually use a rig to do it. So let's rig the cube, all right? So what we're going to do is go Shift-A, and we're going to come down here to empty, and we're going to create, doesn't matter, any kind you want. I'm going to grab a circle empty, I think. You can see right here, if I click on the little empty options, the data block for the empty, the tab here, you can switch it to any type you want. So you could use like a square, or a sphere or something. And empties are just a position in 3D space, position, rotation, and scale in 3D space. And that's it. That's all they are. So they don't render or anything, but you can use them to do all kinds of things. And what we're going to do is, let's see, I'll grab the circle and I'm going to rotate it on the X 90 degrees, and I'll scale it up a bit so I can kind of see it there. And I want this to be the thing that we grab when we're controlling our cube. So I'm going to click on my cube, and this will be my rig, basically. In fact, let's rename it. From empty, we're going to call it cube rig. Let's click the cube in our outliner and then control click the cube rig right here. And then I'm going to hit Control P, and we're going to set parent to object. Parenting in Blender basically just means you're taking one object and you're putting it underneath another one so that whatever you do to that top level one, the bottom one inherits whatever it is you've done. So now we can grab the empty, and as we move it around, it's going to take the cube with it. And you can see, because it's positioned down here at the floor, parent to object. Parenting in Blender basically just means you're taking one object and you're putting it underneath another one so that whatever you do to that top level one, the bottom one inherits whatever it is you've done. So now we can grab the empty, and as we move it around, it's going to take the cube with it. And you can see, because it's positioned down here at the floor, we can like scale Z now, and it's going to affect the cube itself. You can't really see the scale with the empty because it's a flat circle. If I switch it to like sphere or something, you can see that the empty is actually what is scaling, and it's just taking the cube along with it. There we go. We've just made a rig. We've rigged the cube. That's as simple as a rig can be. Rigs can be very, very simple. And the whole idea is it's just a simplified way for an object to have some controls that an animator can work with. So now let's do a really simple animation using stepped keys. Now I want to use stepped keys. I don't want it to switch to Bezier. So I'm going to actually set my preferences here in animation from default interpolation to constant. So this will give me constant automatically. So I'm just going to delete, hit A over here to select all channels, A here to select everything. We're just going to start fresh. And I'm going to set keyframe for everything just with I. And then I'm going to come forward to frame 20. And I'm going to hit SZ and scale this guy down. I'm going to click on the scale tool right here. I'm going to click this box, and that will scale it up. And I'm going to hit SZ and scale this guy down. I'm going to click on the scale tool right here. I'm going to click this box, and that will scale it up on just the X. The scale tool right here. I'm going to click this box, and that will scale it up on just the X and Y, but won't scale it on the Z, right? So now you can see we squish out as we scale down. So he's preparing to jump. So boop, and then let's come forward a bit. And then we're going to, let's reset. For everything, just with I. And then I'm going to come forward to frame 20. And I'm going to hit SZ and scale this guy down. I'm going to click on the scale tool right here. I'm going to click this box, and that will scale it up on just the X and Y, but won't scale it on the Z, right? So now you can see we squish out as we scale down. So he's preparing to jump. So boop, and then, but won't scale it on the Z, right? Click this box, and that will scale it up. I'm going to click on the scale tool right here. I'm going to click this box, and that will scale it up on just the X and Y, but won't scale it on the Z, right? So now you can see we squish out as we scale down. So he's preparing to jump. So boop, and then let's come forward a bit. And then we're going to, let's reset the scale back to what we had before. So I can actually come over here, open up the channel box. I can shift select the scale channels, and I can box select. This is actually X, Y, and Z. They're all in the same spot because they all have a value of, well, whatever their value is. spot channels. I can actually I click on the scale. I'm going to hit SZ and scale this guy down. I'm going to click on the scale tool right here. I'm going to click this box and that will scale it up on just the X and Y, but won't scale it on the Z, right? So now you can see we squish out as we scale down. So he's preparing to jump. So boop, and then let's come forward a bit. And then we're going to, let's reset the scale back to what we had before. So I can actually come over here, open up the channel box. I can shift select the scale channels and I can box select. This is actually X, Y, and Z. They're all in the same spot because they all have a value of, well, whatever their value is. Go over there, that 1.94. So they're all the same value. So I can come here and I can either Control C, Control V, that will paste it, or I could Shift D and that will duplicate, and then I can hit X to lock it, for example, on the X, and I can put it anywhere I want. So that's one quick way. You can also do that from the timeline. So I could just come here, Shift D, and drag it out, and click that there, and now that's duplicated. This key, everything that's here, but if you open down the summary again, it's all the channels. We've duplicated all that information, and we've brought it over and put it here. And Blender will overwrite if you set the key on top of another key. Example on the X, and I can either Control C, Control V, that will paste it, or I could Shift D and that will duplicate, and then I can hit X to lock it, for example, on the X, and I can put it anywhere I want. So that's one quick way. You can also do that from the timeline. So I could just come here, Shift D, and drag it out, and click that there, and now that's duplicated. This key, everything that's here, but if you open down the summary again, it's all the channels. We've duplicated all that information, and we've brought it over and put it here. And Blender will overwrite. If you set the key on top of another key, it will erase everything that was on that other key and just use the new value. And for this one, I want it to be kind of launching up into the sky. So I'm going to come up with it and go in with it, the sky. And Blender will duplicate this one, and then I can hit X to lock it, for example, on the X, and I can put it anywhere I want. So that's one quick way. You can also do that from the timeline. So I could just come here, Shift D, and drag it out, and click that there, and now that's duplicated. This key, everything that's here, but if you open down the summary again, it's all the channels. We've duplicated all that information, and we've brought it over and put it here. And Blender will overwrite. If you set the key on top of another key, it will erase everything that was on that other key and just use the new value. And for this one, I want it to be kind of launching up into the sky. So I'm going to come up with it and go in with it. And then I'm going to come forward, and I want it to kind of like pop up. So I'm going to grab Z, bring it up, and I'm going to take open up the summary. So I'm going to take the scale here. I'll select those and Shift D. Notice these get highlighted as well. It's because think of these as like summaries. If I fold this down, it's just telling me, hey, there's a key that's selected here. It doesn't tell me what the key is. If I open it up, that's how you can find it. And Shift D and just drag it over and click here. And that will set the scale. scale back to the original 50 and just tell me what the key is. If I open it up, that's how you can find it. And Shift D and just drag it over and click here. And that will set the scale back to the original. So now we've got boop, boop, boop. And maybe we rotate. So now we've got and click up. That's how you can find it. And Shift D and just drag it over and click here. And that will set the scale back to the original. So now we've got boop, boop, boop. And maybe we rotate a little bit as well. So I'm going to switch to the rotation tool, and I'll just rotate a little bit, and then maybe bring it up a little bit. All right, let's play that. Let's set the end of our animation to 160, frame 160. So we'll come here to end, and we'll type 160. And now if I hit play, There we go. So it's way too slow, right? But what's cool is we've got all these keys now set, and each one is a specific pose. And now what we can do is we can play with the timing by just moving these around. So I can go over here and say, all right, let's have it. We want this bit happen a bit quicker. So I'm going to grab this, bring this here, grab this, bring this here, bring this here. Let's see how it feels. Now I want this bit to be a bit slower, and then I want us to go up and then really quickly pop up like that. And then this one, I'll bring this one over here and this one over here. I want these to kind of all happen relatively quick succession. I can also B to box select, grab all these. I can also put my playhead like at the first key and hit S to scale, and it will proportionally move all those keys closer together. Here. See how that feels. Nice. Set my timeline to end at 60. So you can see how just moving these guys around, we're able to kind of create a sense of timing with the animation. And that's really a huge part of what animation is. It's all about timing, getting really strong key poses and then getting good timing. Now, when would we turn this back into computer animation, right? Letting the computer spline things out. Well, technically we don't need to. We could keep it like this, or we could even add more poses if we wanted to. So I could have a little bit more control, like kind of quickly move out of the first pose and slow down into the second. So this one's actually going to be pretty similar to the other one. So if I come here, I can actually shift E to duplicate. So I've just copied the pose, right? Much difference between. I like the way this feels now. I feel like I've got enough poses in here that really define graph editor. And I'll just hit and add the roughly so they do that. But it's no longer going to give you like an accurate representation along the side here of the value of every key. But that's all right. Using control in the middle mouse button, you can easily zoom around and use now right or all right. Once everything's selected, hit again A to select all channels, A to select all keyframes, and now right click, and we're going to set to Bezier. You could also come over here to key and interpolation of Bezier. All right, so there we go. Now we've got Bezier curves. Let's see what this looks like. You can see it's pretty cool. It's lost some of the punch, right? And that's because it's easing into everything, right? So we can either at this point go back to constant and set some more hold poses and some more key poses to define everything. Or what we can do is we can play with the curves and try and get to the result that we're after. So one thing I know is if I go to the Z location, you can see every time it lands, it slows down into the land and then speeds up out of it, which isn't realistic. Usually something falls and as soon as it hits, it's a hard stop and immediately starts to jump. So I can grab this and hit S0 and then enter, and then over here, S0, and then this one too, S0. So every landing is a really hard stop. So let's have a look at that. See now those feel punchy? Really good. Now also you can see with this scale down that we've done, it kind of feels like it slows up, speeds down, slows up, speeds down. Let's have a look at the scale. The graph editor is really, really helpful because you can actually see visually when there's weird bumps and you just point out. It looks pretty good.
Image. In about 2 weeks, me and the missus will be leaving for Japan, and although we're really looking forward to it, one big thing for us is not having access to affordable mobile internet. Luckily, Japan has a good amount of public Wi-Fi points, but as we all know, accessing these points exposes your activity to create shadow patterns. They are commonly used to create things like the sun shining through. Blender is much like Mr. Potato Head. Straight out of the box, it's pretty fun and cool, but there's a lot of things you can add to make it that much more fun and fit your preferences. Speaking about preferences, let's open those up in Blender and let's have a look at some of the best settings and built-in add-ons Blender has to offer.
In this beginner tutorial, I will show you how to do lighting in Blender. So there are 3 main types of an image. And if you'd like to help support in this beginning,
Если честно, не хочется запариваться слишком сильно. Я пытался записать ролик на улице. Ну, как на улице, типа, выйти в магазин, показать все, о чем я хочу. Where is my fucking mobile phone? I'm smoking on me.
Я не люблю не работать. Не звони мне на работе. Если звонишь, то звони по работе. Если ты хочешь что-то поработать, позвони мне, найду тебе работу. Неважно где, я всегда на работе. Неважно когда, даже день или ночь. Да, я работаю везде, на любом краю света. Юг, север, запад и восток. Я вообще пока ты не работаешь, мы все это время работаем. И даже если ты работаешь, то я 100% работаю. Я в понедельник работаю, во вторник тоже работаю, среда тоже работаю, четверг я работаю, пятница я работаю, суббота на работе я, воскресенье я работаю, шагаю домой, она уже голая, чую новому, она без опыта, успеваю все, они хотят знать, как же я смог, и такой эффективный я заменил роботы, все вокруг знают, я двигаюсь ровненько, принц российская экономика. На работе я, воскресенье я работаю, шагаю домой, она уже голая, чую новому, она без опыта, успеваю все, они хотят знать, как же я смог, и такой эффективный я заменил роботы, все вокруг знают, я двигаюсь ровненько, Эритайга диплом, молодой принц российской экономики.
Есть вот наушники хорошие. Как думаете, хайповая модель? Вообще должна быть, да, как будто нет. Ну, как будто хайп где-то нет. Ну, это понятное дело, пиздато, но это costs a lot. Этот трек нравится. Нравится первые 10 секунд от Роберта Платина. Мы больше не геи. Да не бывает. Ты меня знаешь. Кажется, первый котят. 16 я уже вкал. Новосибирск.
Если карьера закончится, я буду жить на Алтае. Возьму свою собаку, буду ложиться заката. Я отменю все контракты, больше никаких камер. Я вас оставлю за кадром. Я благодарен.
Неплохой бренд. Это Xiaomi. Команда Xiaomi.
Привет. Меня
Вот ты меня знаешь. Первый косяк. Ты я уже вкал.
Все время на лосе, пацан. Больше дневно мозгов. Текая полный урод. Смотрю на тебя, хочу жить. Так долго я был один. Все время верю в любовь. Мама сказала дебил. Я не хочу быть таким. Как я попал в этот мир? Перед глазами вся моя жизнь. 6-й этаж. Спускаюсь вниз. Красный проспект. Новосибирск. Мне снится все, что я уже успел забыть. Мои треки играют из матчей в моем городе. Маму семьи бегают поклонники. Куплю билеты семье в любую точку на глобусе. Может, не видел меня, но точно узнаешь по голосу. Если карьера закончится, я буду жить на Алтае. Возьму свою собаку, буду ложиться. Я не хочу помнить.
Ребят, я дойду на минутку, вы тут поработайте.
Я не люблю не работать. Не звони мне на работе. Если звонишь, то звони по работе. Если ты хочешь что-то поработать, позвони мне, найду тебе работу. Неважно где, я всегда на работе. Неважно когда, даже день или ночь. Да, я работал везде, на любом краю света. Юг, север, запад и восток. Я вообще, пока ты не работаешь, мы все это время работаем. И даже если ты работаешь, то я 100% работаю. Я в понедельник работаю, во вторник тоже работаю, среда тоже работаю, четверг я работаю, пятница я работаю, суббота на работе я, воскресенье я работаю, шагаю домой, она уже голая, учу ее новому, она без опыта, успеваю все, они хотят знать, как же я смог, и такой эффективный я заменил роботы, все вокруг знают, я двигаюсь ровненько, Эритайга диплом, молодой принц, российская экономика.
Здорово, работники. Давай.
Just leave me a comment down below. So let's jump right on it. The first thing I'm gonna do is hit 1 and then a 5 on the number. To enter the front orthographic. Now I select the vertices and scale the cube up by hitting G for grab, and then hitting Z to move these vertices up only on the Z axis. You can also do this by pressing this move button up here. Now I press 3 on the numpad to enter the right side view, hold shift and drag and scale the cube up by hitting G for grab, and then hitting Z to move these vertices up only on the Z axis. You can also do this by pressing this move button up here. Now I press 3 on the numpad to enter the right side view, hold shift and drag to select the lower vertex. And I'm gonna scale the cube in by pressing S for scale and then Y to constrain it to the Y axis. If you're not into shortcuts, you can press here on the scale button and drag in like this. To open the boxes lit up, I first enter the edge select mode by hitting 2 on the normal part of the keyboard that's not the numpad, or from up here. I select this edge with left click, stand on top of the box, and hit V to rip that edge off a little bit by pulling up like this. Then I go to the right view and open the full lid. I do this in 2 steps because for some reason
Слушай, ток меня будто моя грудь. Помню, как ты слала свой нос. Сделал мне лэп дэнс, ща в этом клубе. На мне LV под крадуль. На моей бэт маски и туль. Выглядим, будто мы были в Кабуле. Слушай, ток меня будто моя грудь. Помню, как ты слала свой нос. Сделал мне лэп дэнс, ща в этом клубе. На мне LV под крадуль. На моей бэт маски и туль. Выглядим, будто мы были в Кабуле. Все мои парни.
О, привет, привет, привет. Алло, Миллер, ты давно писал? Я не знаю, сорян, чё-то не открывал. Так, бля, Миллер, наверное, зашел нахуй полчаса, я подумал, все, меня. Я думал, что я заигнорил, и все. Бля, может быть это... Бля, пиздец, заигнорил своего единственного зрителя, вот это я уебище. Бля, здесь, ура, ура. Блядь, что за эррор ёбаный? Так. А что ты хочешь с ними сделать, с этими 3D моделями ебаными? Шорты смотрел, чисто пацан расслабиться. Вот это, блядь. Блядь, эту хуйню слушать невозможно, сука, почему-то в моем вайбе. Я такой. Не, бля, это норм трек. Правда? Все. Только что же был, блядь, пропал. А, понятно. Так. Сейчас хочу. Я, короче, хочу сделать промо-ролик 3D, в 3D-шку. Типа там, короче, берет там это... Сначала коробка этих ёбаных каких-то сириэлс, у нас вот готовый завтрак ёбаный. Там из него высыпается в тарелку, потом тарелка разъебывается. Я хочу вот такую хуйню сделать. Эти дни краш. Мы с тобой краш. Бой, вот. 3D нормально, если ты... Не, ну я так. Полу для проекта. Хотя даже знать свое место. Что начальник здесь? Блять, только что же, сука, все работало. Ну, сука. Бля. Вы нахуй угораете? Да блять! Неплохая идея. Ну, не знаю, желательно найти какого-нибудь чела, который разбирается. Бля. Сейчас. Что там, разобрался с моим этим? Разобрался с моим свагером? Девро свагером. Сука, что за RIP фейл? Завтра надо будет поехать в другой город, делать решить. Да, все гуд. Да я говорю, да типа, бля. Все норм, все норм. Похуй. Вообще спасибо, что вообще помогаешь. Сука, какой RIP фейл нахуй? Сейчас тебе RIP сделаю, блядь, трек в Playboy карте. Я сейчас включу, вот что мне выдает. Вот это пов мой пов блендер. Это чисто блендер мод. RIP failed, нахуй. Yeah, I'm gonna go fuck this bitch. Это раз... Ну, бля, ну мало ли, там просто, может, я супер-мега хуёво задокументировал. Блядь! GPT, да, нормально работает. Бля, пидорасы американские пытались заблочить докер, но отсосали просто, через 3 дня вернули все. Бля, какие же просто пуси. Просто не вывезли, блядь. Просто не вывезли русичей. Просто русичей не вывезли. Да. Да пропадает, сука.
The right view, it always scrapes off the wrong edge. Because the right view, I open the tool lid. I do this in 2 steps.
Невыгодно будет. Там одна треть комьюнити наших невыгодно будет, да. Да, блядь, это вообще пиздец, типа... Я понимаю, там война идет, но, блядь, она уже 2 года идет, ну, типа, реально. Но чувачки просто, типа... Ну, как бы они поняли, что немножко сосут, как бы, с таким гениальным decision-мейкингом.
Because for some gonna do some cuts on the lid. So while hovering on top of the cube, I'm gonna press Ctrl R to create some loops. Click on the cube, and when these two arrows appear, I press the S key to center the loop.
В это всплыло, нахуй. Уйди, пожалуйста. Типа... Ну, хотя бы вернули, на том спасибо, блядь. Не оставили нас каких-то лохов последних.
Select the middle edge and rip it off with V, and then hit S to leave it in it.
Так, проф, поэтому не хотелось мне работать. Да блин, да я тоже не профик, типа, я умею так немножко там заворачивать, и то с божьей помощью, с помощью чата GPT, каких-то, блядь, видосов, то есть я сам слабенький в этом плане. Ну там, типа, понимаешь, я даже не сам, я видел какой-то сейчас пиздатый курс по докеру, я могу тебе скинуть, ну, типа, у меня максимально, типа, я просто, знаешь, типа, вот сталкиваюсь с задачей, я помню, там, короче, делать штуку, короче, в общем, этот, блядь, проект, на который меня наебали, там, типа, нужно было 4 контейнера, такие, ну, типа, заоркестрировать, типа, ну, не знаю, чтобы одновременно, короче, ебашились. Ну, вот я, короче, просто за вечер, там, нашел какой-то туториал, я там, чел плюс-минус такую же задачу решает. Я в Телеграм тебе скинул, вроде, пиздатый курс. Ну вот, но я его не смотрел, но смотрел минут 40 из него. О, мани, нью-хау. Ну так вот, да, короче, типа, такая тема, что, бля, вообще тупел, пиздец, это еблан. Короче, в общем, просто нашел, что делал, просто на практике. Там на самом деле не так сложно что делать. Раз, два, три. 1, 2, 3. Сейчас лучше. Лютый флоу. Бля, ну мне вот вообще на эту фигурку похуй. Ты же не впадла, я какую хуйню задрать. Вот я хочу что-то типа подобного сделать. Надо, видимо, чел этим, видимо, прям занимается. Какой хуёвый. А вот это пиздец. Дайте... Да. С этим бы челом я бы поработал. Тихо. Так. Шанти. Блин. Что за Шанти? Так. Кстати, заценим портфолио. Да, пиздатая. Это ты сайт сам себе такой сделал? Сам себе такой сайт сделал? Чё это? Не, ну я понял, что ты сам сделал сайт, но что за Шанти? Это Арга, где ты работаешь? Пизда, да, кстати. Красавчик. Ашанти. Йоу. Это типа фирма будущего. Ну не, серьезно. Понял. I got you. Это какой-то китаец. Ну, сейчас. Нормально. Ашанти. Строчка какая-то. Значит, это там в Ашане. Бля, кто-нибудь по такому мне сделал, дайте мне контакты саксофончика. Моделер. Я вряд ли смогу сам нормально научиться тому дерьму. Ну типа я смогу сам научиться, вопрос, блядь, сколько это времени займет. Да, потому что там вот эта пишка, короче, колорин же она называется. Сколько там я уже использовал? Бля. Пять 10 тысяч. Это нормально. Вот если что, у тебя есть какая-нибудь карта не русская, чтобы заплатить 8 баксов? Я бы скинул тебе бабки просто. Не, ну если что, типа если нет, то у меня есть как бы контакт чела, у которого есть немецкая карта. Точнее, не немецкая какая-то, блядь, там. Не немецкая какая-то другая там. Ну, в общем, карта нормальная, принимаемая. Не помню. Страны. Но портфолио у тебя пиздатое. Так. Бля, как думаешь, может быть, просто найти, типа, ой, вот это будет пиздато, кстати. Короче. Может просто найти каких-нибудь чувачков, которые нам сделают 3D-шечку. Так, если есть друг в Турции, можно получить. Я оплачиваю так. Не, ну я посмотрю, там, если что, да, у меня тоже там есть кореш, поэтому, ну, как бы, просто спросил, мало ли. Не, да 8 баксов вообще хуйня, вопрос, бля. Хоть что-то.
Did you ever want to pour many objects into the vessel in Blender without playing with all the complicated simulation settings? tool that allows you to drop objects with made a decent job there and get rid of the queue. Still recommend to donate to the author since they really made a decent job, but I won't tell anyone if you get the free version. I may have did that as well. Okay, once you have it downloaded, open Blender and go to edit or search for the yeah, don't fill it. Once we give some and apply. See you next time.
Просто можно чувачков найти каких-нибудь 3D-шных. Ну, насчет такое, конечно, никто не хочет там просто так работать. Ну, хуй знает, к нему договорим. Да похуй, это пэт-проект, если это типа, так сказать, не обижу, монеты, что-то, если придет самому, то этим челам тоже, этим чувачкам тоже, бля, накинем денег. Часть, конечно, заработанного. О, это то, что я хочу. О, да, секс. Бля, вот дизайнеру этому челу сказал, типа, ты можешь доделать сегодня побыстрее дизайн десктопа? Типа, у нас уже фронт как бы работает. Бля, чуваку вообще похуй. Вообще похуй, поебать. Минус, ладно, все равно не... я сегодня вспомнил мелочи. Так, верстки, а через GPT хотел сделать, а он что-то не работал у меня. Минус, ладно, все равно не моя учетка. Ну, не страшно тогда. Типа, блядь, почему нельзя просто подсуетиться и сделать десктопную версию? Тут не так много. Если чё, если он... Если типа ты вот послезавтра начнешь там работать, и ничего не будет, то, короче, просто... Не, дизайн неплохой. Вот только мне желтый не везде читается, но нормально. Но, дизайнер нормальный, чел, без негатива. Там я написал на форуме, там что-то дизайн в ВКонтакте, типа, нужен бедолага. Ну и так нашел этого бедолагу. Ну вот, и короче... Просто какой-то он не очень работоспособный. Ну, нет, типа, он хорошо, быстро довольно сделал. Ну, типа, там, но просто он там работает только по ночам какие-то, блядь, там, знаешь, в 3-4 утра, блядь. Вот он, типа, ну ладно, надеюсь, ночью сделает. Знаешь, это всегда прикол, типа, ты с утра открываешь, бля, что же он приготовил сегодня? Ничего, не там, что-то крутое сделал. Просто с утра распаковка. Ну, просто, типа, смотришь такой, типа, йоу, круто, не круто. Но это, конечно, не очень люблю такую модель работы, потому что, типа, ты не можешь правки в моменте давать. Ну, а так нормально вроде все, мне тоже нравится. Типа, желтый не везде читается, но похуй пойдет. Если что, потом поменяем. Типа, да, если какой-нибудь еще, типа, найти чела, который поможет с этими роликами всякими. Я все не видел, ролик выложил, но... Если честно, там, блядь, 7 просмотров, и, в принципе, неудивительно, я 2 недели не дропал. Я просто дропнул этот ролик, чтобы потом другие ролики, которые я буду дропать, они, типа, алгоритмами не сжирались. Обычный день любого дизайнера-программиста. Ну вот, короче, и, типа, смысл в том, что я просто этот ролик дропнул, чтобы меня потом алгоритм не сожрали за то, что ты, пидорас, 2 недели не дропал. Я думаю, в пятницу сделать, типа, что там, какой-то обзор функции, хуй знает. Надо будет сейчас, надо в GitHub сейчас закрыть. Точнее, нужно в GitHub сейчас сделать патчи, прописать. Не патчи, а просто. Типа, да, не знаю, мне нужно, типа, я не знаю, надо найти какого-то типа, который бы помог. А ты изучал алгоритмы Ютуба? Нет, я не знаю особо алгоритмов Ютуба. Я не знаю. Ну, типа, я понимаю, что, например, нужно дропать плюс-минус постоянно, но именно, не знаю, типа, вот, алгоритмы YouTube. Ну, типа, посмотрим.
There's a new way to grow your YouTube channel, and it's helping creators get hundreds of thousands of views on their first uploads. Like this channel that hit 1.4 million views on their first video, or this channel that hit 4 million views on their third upload. These channels have cracked the YouTube algorithm because they understand the recent changes that are blowing up small channels on the platform. So in this video, we're going to cover 4 ways you can tackle and...
Ну вот мне непонятно. Мне кажется, если бы я знал, как эти алгоритмы хакать, я бы не, блядь, не рассказал никому.
To fast track the growth of your channel, the final YouTube algorithm puzzle is YouTube is a zero-sum game. Well, almost. It's hard to predict exactly what the YouTube algorithm does, but it does leave clues, like this passage from a study on how the YouTube algorithm works. Essentially, all of this means that you're not creating content within a vacuum. You're battling head to head with other channels in your niche for the audience's attention. It is a bit of a weird situation, I will admit, but on the YouTube platform, there is an infinite room for creators, but a finite supply of audiences to draw upon. And that may be difficult to accept, but it is the truth. And the creators that accept this fact are the ones that are winning. This is because the YouTube algorithm works on a ranking system. It uses a whole load of data such as click-through rate, watch time, likes, dislikes, comments, shares, and a whole bunch of other signals to determine viewer satisfaction. And that defines the video's value to the audience, which determines what the algorithm does. If your video ranks well against other videos, then the algorithm is going to favor your video. But I know what you're going to say next, and you might as well call this YouTube imposter syndrome. Competing against the big channels in your niche can feel really intimidating because you believe these big channels have got all of the unfair advantages that YouTube bestows on them. But I do have some good news. YouTube does not.
Ладно, я спать пойду. Так, давай. Удачи тебе, хорошо поспать, давай. Спасибо большое, спасибо за удачку. Спасибо. Я тоже сейчас спать уже пойду. Я тоже сейчас пойду.
This is because the algorithm is adapting to give small channels a chance to have their content seen by more people. Even YouTube's chief algorithm boffin, kind of made that title up, admits to all of this.
We have a team that is specifically focused on this challenge of trying to identify audiences for creators that are just getting started.
Put simply, if you put in the time and effort to make your videos better than your competitors, then you can see your content rise to the top even with a single video, which is exactly what happened to this channel. When the Market Whisperer posted this video, they were at the very bottom of the YouTube pile. 0 views, 0 subscribers. But in less than 6 months, this single video has hit 2 million views, which proves that even if you are literally the smallest channel on YouTube, you can compete with anybody on the platform. But all of this still leaves us with one big question. How do we actually beat the competition? And what specific parts of your video should you focus on? Well, after studying all of these fast-growing channels, I've noticed one common thing that they all focus on, and it's this: next level ideation. One of the best ways to beat the competition in your niche is to simply come up with better video ideas. And how successful channels do this is by recreating viral ideas from similar niches, which is exactly what this channel did. Justical found these videos on YouTube and they were massive outliers for the channels, meaning that they got far more views than typical for those creators. This tool is available on the vidIQ extension, by the way, so make sure to download it as soon as you can. And when you see these outlier videos, they are the perfect type of content to recreate. And so all Justical had to do was duplicate this viral video format. He did this by first finding an interesting story within his own niche. It was a story about the $19 Fortnite card guy. He then used the same viral title format from the original video and came up with this: $19 Fortnite card guy, the meme that ruined its creator. And then lastly, he took this viral title and paired it with a thumbnail format that was also proven to go viral. And you can guess what happened next: another viral video, a 10x outlier that generated over 2.5 million views for the channel. This is why big creators focus so much on ideation. They have a power to create massive outliers for channels that help them grow at an exponential rate. But coming up with viral video ideas only addresses one part of the YouTube algorithm, which naturally brings us on to part 2, making content for your core audience. Many new YouTubers don't understand this concept. Or maybe it's fairer to say they're not even aware of it. But it is one of the fundamental...
Всем удачки. Бай-бай.